Roadhouse is famous for its fists, knives, and deadly brawls. But behind the scenes, its actors were grappling with cancer, addiction, and death. In this video, let's uncover their real names and pay tribute to the legacies they left behind. Let's go. Patrick Swayze as James Dalton. When he was 36 years old, Patrick Swayze played James Dalton in Roadhouse in 1989, at the peak of his form and fame. As the cool-headed, commanding, yet morally grounded bouncer, Swayze didn't just leave audiences breathless with his sharp, decisive moves. He also left a lasting impression with eyes that always seemed to carry a silent sorrow. But behind the scenes, Swayze was also battling the darkness within himself. Born on August 18, 1952, in Houston, Texas, Patrick grew up between two worlds. One was the brightly lit dance stage of his mother, Patsy Swayze, a renowned choreographer. The other was the quiet loneliness of a strict but silently loving father. In 1982, his father, Jesse Wayne Swayze, died suddenly from a heart attack. That was the moment Patrick Swayze began to spiral. He didn't cry, didn't scream. Instead, he turned to alcohol. He drank to escape the emptiness that was eating him alive. In his memoir, Time of My Life, he wrote, "I lost the one person who understood me the most. I felt like I was screaming in the desert. And alcohol was the only thing that answered." There were days he drank until he passed out, waking up with no memory of what scenes he had filmed. Lisa Nemi, his wife and longtime dance partner, once revealed that there were nights she had to drag him out of the bathroom, where he sat silently crying, drunk, wondering whether he was slowly becoming a replica of his father, strong on the outside, shattered on the inside. That wound never healed. Alcohol clung to Swayze like a curse. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2008, the doctor was blunt. "If you don't quit drinking, you'll die faster." He just laughed. Even while filming the TV series The Beast, he secretly drank at night to hold on to a part of himself. When the chemotherapy tubes came off, the bottle returned to the table, because he couldn't imagine a life without pain. Patrick Swayze took his final breath on September 14, 2009, at the age of 57, after fighting cancer for over 20 months. In his final moments, he lay in a hospital bed, holding the hand of Lisa, the woman who had seen the darkest parts of him, and whispered, "I'm sorry for making you walk through fire with me." A heartbreaking apology. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was around $40 million, but his true value lay in the image of a star who kept walking forward, even while breaking apart from the inside. Ben Gazara as Brad Wesley. When he was 58 years old, Ben Gazara took on the role of Brad Wesley in Roadhouse in 1989 and transformed brilliantly into a charismatic villain, a businessman who controlled the entire town of Jasper with fists, money, and threats. His rugged face, seasoned eyes, and commanding voice made Brad Wesley a memorable antagonist, both seductive and terrifying. But behind that calm demeanor and sharp acting talent was a personal life full of hidden turmoil. Born on August 28, 1930 in New York, Ben Gazara, real name Biagio Anthony Gazara, grew up on the rough streets of Little Italy, carrying within him both the soul of an artist and the fire of rebellion from a young age. After rising to fame through dozens of roles in artistic and independent films, especially through his collaborations with legendary director John Cassavetes, Gazara seemed to have it all: talent, fame, admiration. But his married life was a series of cracks. He was married 3 times, and his marriage to actress Janice Rule ended bitterly after he was caught having an affair. He admitted to having numerous romantic escapades and said he had never been the kind of man who knew how to stop. But it was alcoholism that truly wrecked him. On film sets, he was known for explosive arguments and disappearing without reason, which led to his being dropped from several major projects. In 2008, tragedy quietly returned. Gazara was diagnosed with throat cancer, a disease common among heavy drinkers and those who speak often in a gruff tone. 4 years later, pancreatic cancer took him from the world, ending a life that felt like a movie, full of both glory and shadow. He passed away on February 3, 2012, at the age of 81, leaving behind an estimated net worth of around $20 million and a cinematic legacy marked by darkness but authenticity. Red West as Red Webster. Red West was 53 years old when he played Red Webster in Roadhouse, a character who represented the honest, hard-working citizens of Jasper, a car shop owner who was oppressed but never backed down. That gentle, kind role might have seemed like just a supporting character, but it became a symbol of resilience in the face of Wesley's brutality. Yet in real life, Red West lived a story even more dramatic than the movies. Born on March 20, 1936, in Memphis, Tennessee, West was once a classmate, bodyguard, personal driver, and trusted advisor to Elvis Presley for over 20 years. The two were so close that West slept at Graceland and was ready to punch anyone who hurt the king. But in 1977, that sacred bond broke. West, along with a few other bodyguards, wrote Elvis, "What Happened?" a book that publicly exposed Elvis's drug abuse, depression, and violent behavior. The book created a media storm, enraged Elvis, and he cut off all contact. By the time Elvis died, the two hadn't spoken a single word to each other. Afterward, West was hated by many devoted fans, labeled a traitor, even though his original intent, according to him, was to save my friend from an imminent death. The pain of losing that friendship haunted Red for life. Although he turned to acting, songwriting, and found success, deep down he remained a man carrying the enormous shadow of Presley, and a goodbye that was never spoken. Red West passed away on July 18, 2017, at the age of 81, due to complications from an aortic aneurysm. His estimated net worth was around $2 million, mostly from acting and music. At his funeral, no Elvis song was played, but it was said that his wife, Pat Boyd, quietly placed an old photo on the casket, one of two men sitting together in a Cadillac taken in 1960, Jeff Healey as Cody. When he was around 22 years old, Jeff Healey played Cody in Roadhouse, bringing music into the chaos of the Double Deuce bar. In the film, Cody was a blind guitarist with extraordinary skill, a character that felt lifted straight from reality because Jeff Healey himself was also blind in real life. But Healey's life was a sorrowful ballad, written with physical pain and an unshakable resilience no one expected. Born on March 25, 1966, in Toronto, Canada, Healey lost his vision completely at just 1 year old due to retinoblastoma, a rare form of eye cancer in children. Both of his eyes were surgically removed, leaving hollow sockets beneath his signature dark glasses, something that later became his personal symbol. But instead of giving up, Jeff learned to turn loss into talent. He formed the Jeff Healey Band and rose in the music world like a phenomenon, praised by legends like Eric Clapton and B.B. King. In 2007, he was suddenly diagnosed with lung cancer, a shock for someone who had never smoked. Doctors suspected it was a genetic complication from his earlier eye cancer. He fought to undergo treatment, kept performing music, and completed his final album during his last days, as if he already knew his time was running short. Jeff Healey passed away on March 2, 2008, just 3 weeks before his 42nd birthday. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $5 million, earned through music, not acting. The final image that brought tears to fans' eyes was of him lying on his hospital bed, still clutching his guitar, as if he had never left the stage. His wife Krista said that Jeff wanted to be remembered as an artist who never surrendered, even when the world went dark. And it's true. Healey never saw light, but he brought light to so many. Terry Funk as Morgan. When he was 45 years old, Terry Funk played Morgan in Roadhouse, 1989, delivering a performance packed with muscle and violence. Morgan wasn't just a brutal bouncer at the Double Deuce bar, but a vivid symbol of an era in Funk's life, raw, fiery, and always ready to throw himself into chaos. Audiences loved the character not only for how real every punch felt, but because Funk didn't need to act. He simply had to be himself. Born on June 30th, 1944 in Hammond, Indiana, Terry Funk came from a family with a wrestling legacy and never left the spotlight or the danger of the ring. But the glow of the ring also cast long shadows. Over a career spanning more than 5 decades, he suffered countless broken bones, endured multiple traumatic brain injuries, and had knees so damaged that he wore knee braces more than championship belts. The repeated injuries led Funk, like many wrestlers, to rely on painkillers just to stay on his feet. In a late interview, he bitterly admitted, "I chewed Percocet like candy, not because I wanted to, but because I had to." That addiction was never made public, but everyone who worked with Funk knew. He was a warrior who never surrendered, until his body gave him no choice. Even though his marriage to wife Vicky lasted over 50 years, in his later years, Funk faced another silent enemy, dementia, a consequence of decades of head trauma in the ring. He passed away on August 23, 2023, at the age of 79, after a long battle with heart disease and cognitive decline. His net worth was only around $1 million, a modest figure compared to the stature of a legend once hailed as the godfather of hardcore wrestling. Kimberly Haron as Party Girl. When she was 32 years old, Kimberly Haron appeared in Roadhouse, 1989, leaving a memorable impression as Party Girl, a supporting character in the chaotic bar scenes, standing out with her sultry beauty and seductive presence. Though her appearance was brief, she was unforgettable thanks to her signature Playboy aura. Fitting, as Kimberly had once graced the cover of that iconic magazine in the early 1980s, but behind her glamorous on-screen presence, Kimberly was hiding a silent battle. Born on October 2, 1957 in Santa Barbara, California, Kimberly Haron grew up in the sunshine and color of Hollywood, but she also came to know the dark side of fame early on. When she entered the entertainment industry as a Playboy model in 1981, she immediately became the center of attention, both admired and scrutinized. Although she was never involved in major scandals, Kimberly admitted in a rare interview that she sometimes felt like an object, beautiful but unheard. The pressure to maintain a perfect appearance, the isolation of being overlooked for meaningful roles, and the ruthless competition in the industry led her into a long battle with depression. By the 1990s, Kimberly had nearly vanished from Hollywood. She lived in seclusion, avoided the media, and only close friends knew that she was quietly undergoing rounds of psychological treatment. In 2020, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, a condition she kept secret until it was too late for treatment. Friends shared that she declined surgery because she didn't want her body to be cut. Kimberly Haron passed away on October 28, 2022, in her hometown of Santa Barbara at the age of 65. Her estimated net worth at the time of her death was around $500,000, mostly earned from her peak years as a model and film appearances. Sam Elliot as Wade Garrett. When he was 45 years old, Sam Elliot took on the role of Wade Garrett in Roadhouse, 1989, bringing to life the image of a seasoned cooler, a mentor and loyal friend beside James Dalton. With his prematurely silver hair, iconic mustache, and gravelly Western voice, Elliot was magnetic on screen. Wade Garrett was the moral anchor in a chaotic world, a world-weary man who had shed all illusions but still fought for what was right. And that character closely reflected the real Sam Elliot. Born on August 9, 1944 in Sacramento, California, Sam Elliot grew up caught between ambition and obstacles. His father, a Department of the Interior employee, strongly opposed his dream of acting. He didn't believe I could succeed, and I lost him before I could prove otherwise, Elliot once shared in a rare moment of public tears. The sudden death of his father when Sam was just 18 left a lasting scar, both a motivator and a burden. After years of working manual labor jobs, he finally began landing small roles. But throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Elliot was typecast as the silent cowboy, the stoic man of the West, a role he admitted to having deeply resented. "Hollywood didn't know what to do with me except put me on a horse," he once said bitterly. There were periods when Elliot didn't land a single role for an entire year. He spent that time writing scripts, doing voiceovers, and even working as a handyman to get by. But he never gave up. Fortunately, behind the scenes stood a woman who never gave up on him, actress Catherine Ross, whom Elliot married in 1984. Though they endured long-distance periods, industry pressure, and even divorce rumors in the 1990s, they've stayed together to this day, a rare Hollywood marriage that has lasted over 4 decades. Elliot once said, "Without Catherine, I wouldn't still be myself. She's the flame that keeps me steady in the cold of this industry." Now, at 80 years old, he continues to act, receiving acclaim for his performances in A Star is Born, 2018, The Ranch, and more recently, 1883, once again proving that sometimes it's the old horses who carry the deepest stories. Kelly Lynch as Dr. Elizabeth Clay. When she was 30 years old, Kelly Lynch played Dr. Elizabeth Clay in Roadhouse. Her character, a smart, tough, yet deeply compassionate doctor, brought emotional depth and a human counterbalance to Dalton's violent world. With her blonde hair and eyes that always seemed to see through the main character's inner torment, Lynch quickly captured the audience's attention at the time. But behind that sweet smile was a woman who had long struggled to be recognized as more than a pretty face in an action film. Born on January 31, 1959 in Golden Valley, Minnesota, Kelly Lynch began her career as a model and flight attendant before transitioning into acting. Hollywood was quickly enchanted by her elegant appearance, but that very quality became a cage. "I used to think being beautiful and talented was enough, but they only saw what was on the surface," she once said. Kelly had to endure pressure to stay slim, the looming presence of plastic surgery, and the coldness of producers as she neared the age of 40. She once admitted to experiencing mild depression in the late 1990s, when roles became scarce and the phone stopped ringing. But like her character in Roadhouse, Kelly didn't give up. She moved into television, impressing audiences in series like 90210, Magic City, and more recently, Mr. Mercedes. In real life, she lives peacefully with her husband, writer Mitch Glazer, who has always believed that Kelly is an artist who was never given the right stage. At 66, she continues to act, balancing her family life while mentoring younger actors. Her estimated net worth is around $8 million, but perhaps more valuable is the fact that Kelly Lynch proved this. Beauty may open doors, but it's resilience that earns you a place in a world that can be cold at its core. Marshall Teague as Jimmy. When he was 36 years old, Marshall Teague played Jimmy in Roadhouse, 1989. The most formidable opponent James Dalton ever had to defeat. With a muscular build, piercing eyes, and expert combat skills, Jimmy wasn't just a henchman. He was a violent nightmare for the town of Jasper. The brutal, tense, life-or-death style hand-to-hand fight between Jimmy and Dalton by the lake has since become one of the most iconic action scenes of the 1980s. But what few people know, Teague wasn't acting. He was actually fighting, taking real hits, and paid for it in blood, injury, and a part of his health lost forever. Born on April 16, 1953 in Newport, Tennessee, Marshall Teague was originally a professional close combat fighter and served in the U.S. Navy. He entered Hollywood not through acting school, but with his fists. In the early years of his career, Teague was typecast as mercenaries, bodyguards, assassins, roles with few lines and lots of action. He rarely complained, but in a recent interview, he revealed that during the filming of Roadhouse, a mistimed kick caused a mild ligament tear in his knee, and many fight scenes were reshot until total exhaustion. "I used to think I'm a fighter, no big deal, but the film set isn't the ring. Here, you have to hurt again and again, exactly as the script demands," he said with a laugh, though his eyes showed the weight of experience. No alcohol issues, no scandals, but Teague had to face a harsher truth about Hollywood. There's no room for aging men who only know how to fight. Years later, with his hair graying and action roles fading, Teague transitioned to teaching martial arts, working as a stunt coordinator, and appearing in supporting roles in TV shows like Walker, Texas Ranger, and Nash Bridges. At age 72 in 2025, he continues to work, attending film conventions and training the next generation in martial arts. His estimated net worth is around $3 million, not an enormous figure, but enough to live comfortably. John Doe as Pat McGurn. John Doe was also 36 years old when he played Pat McGurn in Roadhouse. Pat McGurn, the loyal bartender to Brad Wesley, was a small yet colorful character, representing the kind of insider rot that caused the Double Deuce to decay from within. What seemed like a simple role was in fact a reflection of John Doe himself, a man who had lived part of his life in a haze of smoke, alcohol, and the fierce rebellion of American punk rock. Born on February 25, 1953, in Decatur, Illinois, John Doe was the co-founder of the band X, one of the biggest icons of the early 1980s Los Angeles punk rock scene. But fame came with danger. During a concert in 1982, Doe collapsed from a combination of alcohol and sedatives. Those years were a dark spiral, endless tours, a chaotic sex life, shattered relationships, and an addiction that Doe himself later admitted was a song on repeat. The more you played it, the more it ruined you. After a near-fatal car accident in 1985, he chose to get clean, ended his long-term relationship, and entered therapy. "I didn't want to be just another sad footnote in punk history," he wrote in his later memoir. By the time he accepted the role of Pat in Roadhouse, Doe was sober and determined to rebuild, but the ghosts of his past still lingered. He shifted toward more serious acting, appearing in independent films, TV series, and simultaneously continued writing and composing music. At 72 years old, John Doe still lives in California, actively makes music, and often hosts talks on post-punk life, where he recounts an era of rebellion filled with both glory and heartbreak. His estimated net worth is about $4 million. When asked what helped him survive, John didn't mention drugs, money, or fame. He simply answered, "I learned to listen to myself, without letting the noise in my head drown me out." Kevin Teague as Frank Tilman. Kevin Teague was 45 years old when he played Frank Tilman in Roadhouse, 1989, the owner of the Double Deuce Bar, a character who seemed mild-mannered, yet was the first to bravely stand up to Brad Wesley's oppressive rule. His role wasn't the centerpiece of the action, but it was Tilman's quiet resolve, the ever-troubled eyes, and the subtle fear in every line of dialogue that made him a symbol of ordinary people pushed to the brink by violence. And just like his character, Kevin Teague in real life was a man who had quietly battled unseen blows of his own. Born on August 13, 1944 in Los Angeles, Kevin Teague rose to fame for his role as paramedic Roy DeSoto in the TV series Emergency, a role that defined his public image throughout the 1970s. But that fame turned into a double-edged sword. After Emergency, Hollywood typecast him as the TV hero, safe, bland, and lacking depth. Teague once shared, "It took me nearly a decade to be seen again as a real actor." During the 1980s, He struggled with minor roles and even faced a financial crisis so severe that he had to drain his retirement fund to support his family. That wound didn't bleed, but it followed him throughout his career. That's why Roadhouse, despite being a commercial action movie, became a chance to break the mold and prove he could portray a regular man, quietly confronting evil. Today, at 80 years old, Kevin Teague continues acting in theater, occasionally appears on television, and teaches drama to younger generations. His estimated net worth is around $2.5 million. Not a large fortune, but enough to reflect the resilience and depth of a man who chose to stay true to the craft rather than chase fame. Keith David as Ernie Bass. Keith David was 33 years old when he played Ernie Bass in Roadhouse, one of the most memorable supporting characters thanks to his signature voice, deep, warm, and full of presence. As the bartender in a chaotic bar, Ernie Bass didn't fight, didn't threaten, but somehow brought a sense of safety to the audience, a character who stood calmly in the storm and still carried himself with quiet strength. And perhaps that reflected something of Keith David's real life. Born on June 4, 1956, in Harlem, New York, Keith David began his career on the Broadway stage, but spent years fighting for a place in film. Despite having a legendary voice, later becoming a go-to for hundreds of animated films, video games, and commercials, David was once denied roles simply because of his skin color. He once recalled, "I didn't ask for lead roles. I just wanted to audition, and many times, the door closed before I could even touch the handle." Throughout the 1980s, Keith David faced quiet, insidious prejudice and bitter silence. It wasn't until his roles in Platoon, They Live, and The Thing that he was finally recognized as a truly versatile actor, not just a beautiful voice. In 2025, at age 69, Keith David continues to appear regularly on television, Greenleaf Nope, and lends his voice to major projects. His estimated net worth is around $5 million. But his greatest legacy doesn't lie in numbers. It's in his presence, a symbol for a generation of black actors who didn't just survive, but shined with talent and dignity. Gary Hudson as Steve. Gary Hudson was 33 years old when he played Steve in Roadhouse, 1989, appearing as the embodiment of disappointment, a sleazy, undisciplined bouncer fired the moment he crossed paths with Dalton. But what made the character Steve memorable wasn't strength or psychological depth. It was the face of someone who once believed this would be the biggest break of his life. And bitterly enough, it was. Just not in the way he hoped. That stepping stone didn't take him upward. It dragged him down, silently. Born on March 26, 1956 in Newport News, Virginia, Gary Hudson was once one of the promising faces expected to break through from supporting roles in the late 80s. Tall, handsome, athletic, with just enough mischief in his eyes to play both hero and villain, Hudson entered Hollywood full of ambition. But no one warned him about the chronic gray zone of the industry. After Roadhouse, it seemed like things were about to begin. But then, nothing. Only forgettable supporting parts, appearing for a few minutes, then fading away. "I didn't fall into any scandals, and maybe that was my mistake," he once admitted with a bitter smile. Never famous enough to be a star, Gary Hudson became a name in silence. By 2025, at age 69, Gary Hudson lives quietly in Canada, no longer regularly seen in public. His net worth is around $1.5 million, accumulated from bit roles and uncredited voice work. No memoir, no comeback. When asked about Roadhouse, he simply smirks and says, "I once thought it was the beginning. Turns out, it was the farewell." Perhaps Gary Hudson carries a different kind of tragedy. The tragedy of a man who was never allowed to fall, because he was never truly allowed to rise. Roadhouse gave us countless memories, from life lessons to unforgettable characters and the actors who brought them to life. Do you think these losses deserve more recognition? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next haunting behind-the-scenes story.